Hello, Garland Nixon here, hanging out with Kit Clarenberg, and you may be shocked to know that there may be somebody in your phone snooping around. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, hanging out with the one and only Kit Clarenberg. And just so you know, Kit has a, let me see, here we go here. Oops. Kit Clarenberg has a great Substack. It's Global Delinquent, is that it?
Yeah.
It's called Global Delinquents. And you should go there and follow him and keep up with all of his good work, just so you'll know. And for those of you who want to follow along with us, he's got a great article out. Israeli predator smartphones spyware exposed. Go there. Make sure you follow Kit and make sure you subscribe to his Substack, because he does a lot of fantastic work and you don't want to miss it. All right, let's get going. Shocking! I can't believe it. There's an Israeli predator spyware, smartphone spyware exposed. Let's talk about it, Kit Clarenberg.
Yeah, well, I mean, first, thank you very much for that extremely kind intro, Garland. I mean, I think this is quite an extraordinary story, which very oddly seemed to fly under the mainstream radar, and I think in part that's because effectively the source of this expose was Amnesty International. Now, of course, Amnesty is a dubious organization, to say the least. They do some good work, and they put out this very detailed investigation into the internal workings of Intellexa, which is this digital espionage company that has all sorts of products for spying on smartphone users. Now, at no point during this investigation did they mention that Intellexa is owned by an Israeli military intelligence veteran and is staffed by Israeli spies. So, I think that might have been why it didn't get the kind of headline news internationally that it deserved. But I mean, to give the devils their due, it was very detailed. It was based on leaked slides and presentations given by Intellexa about their assorted spyware resources, and a lot of the content was extremely frightening. So, to give you just one example, they have a tool called Predator, which is linked to grave human rights abuses in multiple countries, and is usually used to target journalists and human rights activists and civil society actors and protesters. They, of course, in the manner of these things, they don't have any restrictions on who their clientele are. No matter how repressive the government, they're willing to license this. But Predator, it allows customers to access target smartphones, cameras, microphones, encrypted chat apps, emails, GPS locations, photos, files, browsing activity, like everything is broken open to customers, typically governments, but some corporates. The way that they typically do this is via serving targeted users ads, the Intellexa runs a number of companies that are active in the ad serving ecosystem, and they create fake ads, including job listings, which if you click on them, then your phone gets infected. And they have a number of ingenious methods of ensuring that you don't find out that your phone's been infected. So it takes a kind of bespoke approach to extracting data, which takes account of whether a phone is connected to the internet via data or Wi-Fi, a device's battery level. So when it's like taking out all of this information, it doesn't, like drain a phone instantaneously of network or power to avoid stoking user suspicion. And it even has a component where if Predator thinks it's been detected by a user, it will self-destruct, leaving no trace of its presence on an impacted device, which is, I mean, it's just almost unbelievable. But what's even more unbelievable is, on top of serving fake adverts that people click on, and of course, it's actually very rare that people click on internet ads deliberately. They also have what's known as zero-click infiltration. Now, this is a separate tool called Aladdin, and such as its ingenuity, if you're, say, using your phone or your tablet or even maybe your computer to look at a website, just by looking at an advert, your device can become compromised, which is completely insane. And is, a huge escalation from, say, like Pegasus, which of course, that relied on people having WhatsApp and end users, as it were, having people's WhatsApp details so they could contact them and then install this spyware. I mean, this is a whole other level of completely unwilling infiltration of people's devices, this really should be getting a lot more attention. In Amnesty International's report that I kind of dissected, they refer to how there is an entire ad-int, which is to say advertising intelligence sector. And Intellexa is by no means unique in offering these services. This is like a really serious problem that internet advertising platforms like need to take action on now, like in the most drastic way. No sign of them doing so far.
And which of course implies complicity, because let's face it, with the assets that these places have, Google, you name it, right? With the assets that they have, if you know it, and I know it now, and everybody in the chat knows it, then they already know it. So if they know what these people are capable of and they don't take any action about it, then that just implies that, well, we know that a while back, Israel, like kind of openly, Google hired a bunch of Unit 8200 people. So it only stands to reason that there is some level of complicity here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's like, I mean, this is something that I tried to drill into in my piece as well, which is that, like, look, there is a entire call it an industry, or there is entire ecosphere within the Israeli state, which is all about creating these mass spying tools, or mass disruption tools. These are usually honed in universities in Tel Aviv and elsewhere. And then these resources are road tested by the IDF and Unit 8200 or Mossad against Palestinians. And then their experience of using these tools is used as marketing material to the high bidding government clients. Now, to give you just one example, like Technion, which is the Israeli Institute of Technology, they have dedicated labs which are concerned with creating the most invasive, insidious digital surveillance tools imaginable to target Palestinians with. Then yes, as I mentioned, the fruits of their labors, so to speak, are then liberally employed by the IDF and Israeli intelligence more generally. And then a lot of the time, these people end up working for tech firms, not just like Google, but also like Riverside FM, which is like some streaming service. I mean, it's like their tendrils extend so far into so many different spheres that you would never know it. Quite clearly, these tools in themselves are concerned with infiltration. But then when alumni of say Technion or Mossad end up working for these companies, that's a form of infiltration as well. It's like they're creating these backdoors in everything for Israel's benefit.
One of the things that I think is aligned with that, in your article, research published by Recorded Future indicates Intellexa has covertly established dedicated mobile ad companies to create bait advertisements, including job listings to lower target. Now, the important part of that is this. So they're getting it all the way down, right? They're like Standard Oil. We're going to have the oil. We're going to have the train companies that make the trains. We're going to have the people that lay the train tracks, and then we're going to hold the company that handles everything, right? So now they're creating ads. They've got companies. So now I need ads. I go find a company that creates ads. But little do I know, it's an Israeli front company that I pay to create ads, and they create ads that work for some of their other software. So it seems to me that it's exactly what you're saying. Not only do they get involved in other companies, they're literally creating front companies themselves that may or may not provide a service or a business, but even that is not the real service and business they're doing.
Yeah, precisely. And it's also important to bear in mind as well, as we're hearing a lot about cyber warfare, in the context of the Ukraine proxy war. And how NATO is increasingly getting involved in cyber attacks, etc. And it's like you've got to bear in mind like the knock-on effects. If say let's imagine say that hackers break into the digital infrastructure around like water supply, right? And then they mess that up. Meaning that like people's water systems at home fail, including like their toilets or like the water that comes out of their sink. Then there's a risk that people get sick as a result of this, and it fills up hospitals. And then it pushes healthcare systems to the brink. Like everything is so digitized now that almost anything can be a weapon. And that's really, really, really dangerous. And it's not something that is on the average person's radar. And yeah, like as you mentioned, the fact that Intellexa has created mobile ad companies to create quote unquote bait advertisements. I mean, how is this not a front page scandal? I mean, about 15 years ago in the UK, the fact that it was very easy to break into people's mobile phone answering machine messages because there was a password which was like 1234 to get into the average mobile user's answering machine messages, and people didn't know about this and didn't change it. That was a massive scandal in the UK. This is kind of like Web 2.0 version of that, and it's not being looked at with any seriousness at all. I mean, this Amnesty International, which when they publish reports about enemy countries like Russia or China or Syria, before the fall of Assad, got blanket coverage. This report got, as far as I can see, zero mainstream pickup whatsoever, like at all. And it's, and as I say, everything is so digitized now, in this kind of this world of the Internet of Things, that breaking into one aspect of an individual's kind of digital life or a digital operations, you can affect so many different things. And this is not being talked about. And I might add as well that Intellexa continues to operate with impunity, despite the fact that for years what they've been doing has been the subject of significant controversy, to the point that even the US Treasury sanctioned the firm's Israeli intelligence founder and his closest confederates within the company, and various different commercial entities associated with Intellexa. They're still going, this hasn't dented their operations at all. And then we contrast this with, say, like the International Criminal Court, where sanctions on Karim Khan and other officials mean they can't even use Microsoft.
Right.
So quite clearly, there has, on paper, action has been taken against this company, but it doesn't seem to have done anything. And then we obviously are, the obvious question is, well, was this just done for show, to allow Intellexa to carry on going? Because this stuff is always of enormous interest to Western, particularly US power structures, intelligence agencies, security services. The FBI was very interested in Pegasus, of course, and really wanted to start using this, despite the fact that it's completely illegal. And when it became well known that Pegasus was being used by state and corporate entities internationally to hack into people's phones, that created international outcry, criminal investigations, and private litigation, which is still ongoing after many years. But it seems like Intellexa should be within that same kind of realm of calumny and obloquy, but it actually isn't. For whatever reason.
Well, something else that's interesting, and one of the terms I always like to use is "there's no honor amongst thieves," right? And that is that, okay, so they sell this software to this company in this country. Okay, country X, you can buy our software and you can spy on your citizens and spy on people and still all kind of spying, right? But then behind the scenes, they're spying on the people. So if I'm in country X and I'm using it to spy on my people, or I'm this country over here, I want to look at their people, so I buy it from this Israeli company and I use it. They're in the background looking through everything that I look at. It appears it says they have something called Team Viewer, and it suggests that they can peruse at least 10 different customer systems simultaneously. So, as I always like to say, no honor amongst thieves, is there?
No, I mean, absolutely not. I mean, from one thief to another, I can confirm that's true. But no, in all seriousness, Garland, I think that was another thing that was really, really, really striking, is that there was Amnesty International reported on this leaked Intellexa training video, where a senior Intellexa kind of apparatchik showed staffers how the system works in practice, and they tapped into what customers were spying on, who and what customers of theirs were spying on in real time. And at one stage, a staffer in the video asked, is this a demonstration or is this real? And they were like, no, this is real. We're monitoring what our clients are monitoring. We have that level of insight. And this is a core there is an ongoing legal case in Greece where Intellexa staff and members of the country's security apparatus are being sued for using Intellexa to hack into the phones of government ministers, military officials, judges, and journalists. And like a core bone of contention is whether Intellexa itself knew what this was being used for. Well, I mean, the leaked videos show that they keep a very close eye on what their customers are doing and are happy to show that off. So, I mean, this raises the very obvious risk that on top of people being spied on without their knowledge or consent by governments using this technology, the technology owners themselves are also spying on them. You know, and it's like, I mean, and again, this is a point I'm making in the piece, is that Pegasus has been, you know, very quick to, when due to all of this litigation and, you know, ongoing the world over, because so many governments use this to hack into people's phones, you know, they're very quick to say, we had no idea how this would be used. This was completely, like, you know, arm's length from us. We were not told you know, who and what our customers were spying on. Well, I mean, this training video shows that Intellexa was well aware. You know, which is a whole other layer of depraved and sinister. And you got to bear in mind that, like, you know, in the manner that when Facebook developers used to be able to, you know, access user data if they downloaded particular applications to their Facebook profiles, which was the kind of basis of the Cambridge Analytica scandal. You know, the Facebook executives said, well, we were sure that there was a black market for private Facebook data that was harvested by developers. Does a similar black market exist for data which is harvested by the customers of Intellexa and then just sold on because it's so readily accessible?
I would say most likely. Here's something that's interesting. The proliferation of ominous private spying tools and their industrial scale abuse by paying customers no aberrant bug, but an intended upshot of the Zionist entity's relentless crusade for cyber warfare supremacy. In 2018, Israeli Premier Benjamin Netanyahu, who boasted, quote, cybersecurity grows through cooperation, and cybersecurity as a business is tremendous. We spent an enormous amount on our military intelligence and Mossad and Shin Bet, an enormous amount. An enormous part of that is being diverted to cybersecurity. We think there's a tremendous business opportunity in the never-ending quest of security. Boy, isn't it nice to know that Netanyahu is all for security, or what he considers security. Your thoughts on this particular passage?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I thought that was important to include because it's like, yeah, you know, as I mentioned, that the so many components of Israeli society are structured around the development of spying tools like this, and so frequently it's as if the US and Britain and other, you know, Western sponsors of the Zionist entity are just using Israel as like a laboratory for tools that they then can themselves exploit and use. And yeah, like for many years, Israel had this whole thing about how, oh, you know, we're the startup nation, we're this like kind of miniature Silicon Valley in the Middle East, etc. Now, October 7th, due to the, you know, alleged, for emphasis very much on alleged, intelligence failures that led to Hamas's Operation Al-Aqsa flood on October 7th, 2023. This did damage their credibility in as a cybersecurity leader, and I mean, and it led to a significant collapse in foreign investment in the Zionist entity's tech industry. But it's quite clear that governments are still willing to stump up enormous amounts of money for very specific tools that emerge from this wider milieu, which is encouraged, funded, facilitated by the Israeli government. And again, this is stuff which is honed effectively in what is effectively a war zone, i.e. the relentless attacks on Palestinian civilians, innocent men, women, and children. That then gets turned on the domestic populations of Western countries one way or another, without them knowing, let alone giving consent. Of course, they wouldn't consent to any of this. And so for all of the damage that Israel has suffered economically in the wake of October 7th, clearly there are tech firms or companies within the sector that are still doing really well, even though in the case of Alexa they're formally sanctioned by the US government for conducting illegal activities. So again, the question has to be asked, is this entirely deliberate? And if the answer's anything other than yes, I would be absolutely shocked. And this goes on and on and on and on and on. I've mentioned Pegasus several times. I think it's worth bearing in mind again that we have been told so often that that this is it's an Israeli tool, it's an Israeli tool, it's an Israeli tool. Well, I mean, who ultimately funds and underwrites the existence economically of the Zionist entity? Oh, it's the US. So is it an Israeli tool? Really? Or are they just publicly taking the flag for something that the US wanted to be developed, supported the development of, and yes, encouraged the proliferation of its usage worldwide?
I'm 100%. I'm 100% with you on that, and it raises an obvious question about October 7th, and that is, and I think it's a self-evident. It's axiomatic. This is self-evident. If we understand that Israel has tremendous amount of cyber tools, right? Clandestine cyber tools. And they brag about their ability to monitor things going on everywhere, know what's going to happen, what everybody's going to do, exploding pagers, phones everywhere, you name it. But at the same time, we're to understand that they had no clue that October 7th was going to happen. They had no way of knowing. They were caught flat-footed. And then in a place where they should have been able to respond very quickly, it took them an extremely long term to respond. And then when they responded, clearly it was in disarray and they were shooting their own people. They didn't know who to shoot. They were confused, accidentally, friendly fire. When you put together, these things, it's like a math professor saying, well, yes, I am a math professor, but I can't figure out how much 1 + 1 is a little confusing for me. Makes no sense. The quadratic formula, boom, there it is. Well, how much is 1 + 1? I have no clue. It doesn't stand up to scrutiny, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I actually I caught an enormous amount of flack. I must say that, after in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, I stated very loudly, I think that this was allowed to happen. I caught an enormous amount of flack from people saying that I was, overestimating Israeli intelligence wizardry, and that I was somehow, diminishing the success of Palestinian freedom fighters. And it's like, well, if you actually have any understanding of Israeli, spying capabilities, then it's pretty much impossible for them to have not known what was going to happen in advance. And you have, 10 years ago, Israel was making a lot of noise about the fact that it had innovated a spying drone the size of a butterfly that could enter people's homes without them knowing, and had, you know, full video and audio coverage of what was going on inside. So it's like, you know, bearing in mind that Hamas, in the lead up to October 7th, they made a promotional video of exactly what they were going to do, including them flying on gliders. And not only that, they were seen by Israeli intelligence doing this. The prospect that this caught the Israelis unaware is basically inoperable, you know, as a perspective. And you know, since October 7th, we have had a pretty much steady flow of media reports about how you know, the Israelis had you know, very detailed intelligence on what was going to happen, that there were warnings from partner intelligence agencies, presumably MI6 and the CIA, amongst others. They even it's even been reported by the New York Times that Israeli officials had a detailed 40-page battle plan outlining in precise detail, point by point, quote unquote, operational acts of flood a year before it happened. So I mean, yeah, like, I mean, they may well have been caught unaware by the success of it, but the idea they didn't see it coming is completely ludicrous. Now, I mean, this is somewhat a deviation from our from the topic of discussion, but something I wrote about back in December 2023 for Mint Press, and I think it stands the test of time today. There was an academic study published that month which found that there was an enormous amount of suspicious stock market activity betting against the performance of Israeli stocks just for October 7th. Now, I mean, you know, I mean, many viewers will have seen the film The Big Short, where, you know, a group of investors short the housing market, which in 2007, which you know, at the time was considered insane because you know, this is the market that's too big to fail or too successful to fail. But they could see, there were certain people who could see that the crash was coming. Now, there was a lot of shorting, which is to say betting that stocks would perform poorly, of Israeli stocks in the lead up to October 7th. But even more suspiciously, there was a similar pattern in trading of Israeli stocks in April 2023, right when Hamas was planning to execute operational acts of flood, but then called it off at the last minute because they thought they'd been sniffed out by the Israelis. So I mean, that's, you know, quite an extraordinary coincidence, and you know, if my career in journalism has taught me anything, is that coincidences don't happen.
Right.
You know, yeah, like, and it's a subject that a lot of people are you know, unwilling to go near, because it would to, you know, if we do accept this narrative, then we would have to, you know, in the process, accept that basically that everything that's happened since October 7th, which includes, you know, an ongoing 21st century Holocaust, and also the collapse of the Assad government, was actually part of a wider plan, and that Hamas walked into a trap, or, well, paraglided into a trap by doing this. And, you know, the death toll is, you know, in the hundreds of thousands. Gaza is basically an uninhabitable mess of rubble and, you know, radioactive material at this stage. Like, yeah, it's not nice to think that actually someone in, well, you know, probably Benjamin Netanyahu and his closest advisors in a smoke-filled room, you know, came up with this in advance. But I mean, an enormous amount of evidence points towards that.
Yeah, I agree. Certainly, you know, the bottom line is it should be at least considered, and people should continue to look into it, because there's certainly evidence there that points in that direction. Before we go, and I did want to ask you about this. Did you, and you can comment or not if you want to, did you have any thoughts on the Jacques Bod, since you are in, your sanctions, or is that something you prefer not to comment on?
Oh yeah, oh no, absolutely. Like, I mean, I know Jacques, and he's cited my work in his book, so he's clearly a very intelligent guy. Sorry, I kid,
Yeah.
but like, yeah, like I know. I mean, Jacques Baud is he is someone who has from the very start of the proxy war. This is a Swiss military intelligence vet. It's a guy who served his country with pride. He's someone who's been part of the OSCE mission, which is to Ukraine, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. He's someone who's dedicated his life to trying to prevent wars from happening. His sanctioning is absolutely insane. And the stated basis for this was that he was, quote unquote, making conspiracy theories, which doesn't really make much grammatical sense. But I mean, I do think this is it's probably intended as a warning. But it also absolutely should be taken as cause for massive concern for anyone, wherever they are in the world, as a result of what can happen if you dare challenge ascendant narratives. Now, there is an academic, what's her name? The
woman Lamb.
No, sorry,
Lamb.
No, she's a Swiss-born academic who is very critical of Western imperialism in Africa. Is that was that Andrea?
Is her last name's not Lamb? Is it Lamb?
Yeah. Like, so she was she was yes, no, sorry, it was Natalie Yamb.
Yamb, I knew. Okay, yeah, that's
Swiss,
Lamb. It was Yamb.
Yeah. So she's a kind of Swiss Cameroonian academic who was she was sanctioned by the EU because of her very trenchant criticism of continuing European imperialism in Africa, particularly in Cameroon, from where she in part hails from. There's a video you can find on YouTube where she talks about how initially, when she was sanctioned by the EU, she thought it was quite funny because she didn't live in an EU country. She wasn't born in an EU country. She was born in Switzerland, and she didn't have any property or assets in the EU. But actually, this very, very quickly meant that, she can't return back to Switzerland because she would have to fly through EU airspace, and she's banned from doing so. Also her access to all manner of things, ranging from Netflix to Booking.com, were curtailed. Her bank cards got cut off, etc. So I mean, this is a very serious escalation, and Jacques Baud is he's someone who, on top of framing how the Russia special military operation came to be, and the Ukraine's breach of the Minsk Accords, their failure to implement them, their shelling of the Donbass in the weeks leading up to the outbreak of the proxy war. He relies on Western and Ukrainian sources for his information. And he's also someone who's been critical of the fact that Russia is at war. He doesn't justify the conflict. He tries to put in context why the conflict is happening. So even someone who's not some rabid pro-Putin kill all the Ukrainians type, ultra nationalist figure. He is now facing having his life ruined, as a direct result of this. And yeah, if they can strike someone who's not from an EU country, then that's the overwhelming majority of the world doesn't live in the EU, the consequences could be pretty drastic. So yeah, it is horrific. I'm hoping to speak to them at some point about this, but yeah, it is a warning to us all of the lengths that Western powers are willing to go to silence critics and people challenging their overarching narrative. Because on Ukraine, that narrative has been that a prevailing narrative has been lost for a very long time. I mean, if we rewind even 3 years, we were getting relentless headlines about how Ukraine had destroyed Russia's entire army, that Russia had suffered millions of casualties, that Ukraine was winning, that they were in with a chance of expelling the Russians from their land. But not only that, but recapturing Crimea. Now the bleakness of the battlefield reality is being admitted even by doggedly pro-Ukraine journalists, if you can call them that, and members of the Ukrainian military themselves. This is irretrievably lost now, but even at this late stage, when the Trump administration seems to be very seriously pushing for peace, they're going to try and silence and punish people who undermine their lies.
Well, and here's something, they use the same language for both of them. And here's what it says: therefore, and then they insert their name, is supporting actions or policies attributable to the government of the Russian Federation. Here's my question: what does it mean, actions or policies, supporting actions or policies? Okay. Attributable to the government of the Russian Federation. What context is it attributable? Is it that they said it? Is that it attributable kind of implies that that's where they originated? You know what I mean? Like the Russians came up with it and they're supporting these but it wouldn't matter realistically. So that's the thing, which undermine or threaten democracy, the rule of law, stability, or security. Democracy, rule of law, where you can arbitrarily say this person is a citizen of Switzerland or Sweden or whatever country, Morocco. Okay, they're okay. And that particular country hasn't chosen to take any action over them whatsoever. However, a greater supranational organization says, we're going to decide that the person that lives in Sweden or Switzerland or Spain can or can't do this. Their own country has taken no action against them whatsoever. Democracy means, in theory, they voted for the people, for the government of their own country. They didn't vote for anybody in the EU. So they're underlying democracy by people that they didn't vote for, overruling the people that they did vote for.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that we've passed the year anniversary of and it's been such as the event, such as the pace at which events move. We've kind of already forgotten that a year ago in Romania, the results of a presidential election were overturned because the wrong candidate who stood on a peace platform, Calin Georgescu, his victory was just overturned arbitrarily for no good reason whatsoever. I said at the time that we will see more of this kind of just completely brazen autocracy, and very sadly I've been proven right. We've seen again and again and again the EU undertaking increasingly draconian measures against people who don't toe the line, whether that's on Gaza or on Ukraine or on all manner of issues, including even NATO itself. there was going to be a referendum in Slovenia in July this year on NATO membership, but it got cancelled at the last minute because there was enormous pressure from the US and Britain to do so. Slovenia is one of many countries where the population doesn't actually want to be part of NATO and are very unhappy about the fact that being embroiled in this military alliance, this kind of Hotel California, as it were, imposes demands and obligations on its members without their governments having any say in it, like, oh, you have to spend 5% of your total budget on defense. Now, I mean, on the subject of people being accused of peddling or supporting Russian disinformation or supporting foreign powers without actually doing so. If we think back to May 2023, that I got detained returning back to the UK, my country of birth, under counter-terror powers, and the explainer pamphlet I was given after I was detained specifically said, you can be engaged in hostile activity on behalf of a hostile foreign power without you knowing or wanting to, or without the hostile foreign power on whose behalf you're acting knowing or wanting you to either. I have frequently joked, well, it's quite some conspiracy when conspirators don't know they're conspiring. The other day, it got zero media pickup whatsoever because, these things never do. There was an independent review, quote unquote, by the British government of existing counter-terror powers. Now, it had a whole section dealing with the type of legislation under which I was detained for 6 hours and digitally strip searched and quizzed about the finer points of my private life and my political views and my personal relationships. This independent review not only states that this is a legitimate power to have, the ability to accuse anyone of working for a hostile power without knowing or wanting to. It also has this whole section of different activities which could and should be considered under these powers. So, for instance, it suggests that let's say someone develops an encrypted messaging app. This doing so would make it more difficult for British security and intelligence agencies to monitor communications. It's reasonable to assume that a foreign state would support this, even if the foreign state itself is not responsible for creating this app. So, I mean, this is creating suspicionless crimes that people will commit without wanting to, without intending to, without knowing. It's like this Orwellian rubber stamp for all sorts of restrictive measures. I mean, this is just the UK. I'm sure the EU is, mulling similar, powers and restrictions currently as well, because if one country can get away with it, why wouldn't others try to as well? We're entering a very frightening period, although, I mean, if there is cause for some optimism within this, it's usually always when repressive power structures are on the verge of collapse that they become their most repressive. So we may be looking at, the collapse of the EU, the collapse of NATO, before we might think or know it. It's just a pity we have to live in the interim period and suffer as a result.
Yeah, I've been saying here recently that the EU the European bloc has effectively collapsed as a modern political entity. You know what I mean? What you look at as a modern political entity, it's not that anymore. It's you know, it is a farce. It's farce. It's a farcical entity. I'm with you. What they've basically resorted to now, you know, I'm retired law enforcement, and there was a term: if the police department wanted to do something or accuse you of doing something wrong, and they had nothing else, they called it QBO, right? And this was a catch-all: conduct unbecoming an officer. If you just did something and there's nothing written that you can't do it, let's say they just didn't like that officer and they wanted to get him for something, they would say, oh, okay, you're going to get a letter in your file and 3 days off. What for? Conduct unbecoming an officer. So effectively, the EU now has conduct unbecoming an EU citizen. What did you do? Well, you said something about the Russians, or maybe you didn't. I don't know. You know, you were walking down the street on a sunny day. That's conduct unbecoming. There you go. You're official. It's absurd. At any rate, let's remind everybody that where they can find all of your good works on Global Delinquents. I think this is it. I believe. Here we go. I got a picture of it. Everyone, we were talking with Kit KLARENBERG. We're fortunate enough to have him on. He's a fantastic investigative journalist. Global Delinquents. Look at all of this stuff. Operation Condor, Hit Squad, the Don Sturgis Inquiry cover-up. Man, there is good work here. If you want to find out what the global elite are up to, and here's a hint: no good is always the answer. Kit KLARENBERG is the guy who at his Global Delinquent Substack, you can find out everything. Just go to Kit KLARENBERG, as you can see, with the .com, and that will take you to everything. Thanks a lot, Kit. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
Yeah, anytime. God bless you. Thank you so much, Garland.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye. And everyone, thank you very much. Don't forget, I want to thank all my Patreon people, PayPal people. A lot of people in PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee are using that to donate. I appreciate that. There's other options, Cash App. And of course, there's the P.O. Box. People send me, there are people that send just cards, happy holidays or Merry Christmas or whatever the case may be. There are people that send books. If you got a book you might want me to read or promote. There are people that send magazines, that write stuff up. Hey, Garland, I was thinking this, blah, blah, blah. And maybe like some people are not into sending all of their crap online. So whatever the case may be, if you want to do a donation, if you want to just send a card, if you want to write something up, P.O. Box 32, Glen Burnie, Maryland, 21061 is the place for snail mail. Thank you very much. I'm out.